of the middle. And shin is the second to last letter. The reason why toph is not included there is because the next ring around the three mothers are the 7 doubles. Those are the 7 letters that can be pronounced 2 different ways. Modern Hebrew, some of them aren't pronounced 2 different ways, like the gimel. Right. But in more ancient Hebrew, those have been understood to be the 7 doubles. What?
Well, what do you mean they're pronounced differently?
So like bet and vet.
Right, but
It's
what
the
about
same
resh?
symbol. So must have had 2 different pronunciations at some point. That I don't know. But aleph, mem, shin. Aleph, some say represents or, which is light. Mem represents mayim, which is water. And shin is the aish, which is fire. So elements of creation, they're considered the 3 mothers. So you have the 3, then the 7, then the 22. I don't know if I read that there are 31 nerves that extend from the spinal cord or from the cranium. Our nervous system is made up of 31 nerves, so the rabbis talk about that the 31 nerves from the spinal cord, and then the 32nd is the brain itself, so that the letters really are the mind. So in Hebrew, in Kabbalah, wisdom is the undifferentiated mind. Wisdom, there's no evil or good or light or dark in wisdom. It's just wisdom. It's everything all together, right? The opposite of wisdom is understanding. Doesn't seem like it to us. Understanding is where everything is differentiated. So one way to understand that is that water is undifferentiated, right? You take a glass of water, you pour it back into the pool, you can't ever get that same glass out again. But a system, if you put water through pipes, it becomes differentiated. So in creating the world, you have God, who is the undifferentiated mind, who is everything, and then God creates a system of pipes through letters and numbers. And then God's Spirit comes through those pipes, and that's the world we live in, a world of understanding, of differentiation, right? Not oneness. God starts as one and then becomes differentiated. So just some interesting things. There are 3 times, so in terms of the 3 mothers, the 7 doubles, and the 12 elementals, which are the different letters. So there are 3 times in the Torah where it says God made, the words God made. So that is understood as the 3 mother letters. 7 times where it says God saw, and 10 times where it says God said. That equals 20. Okay. Anyway, that's just interesting. Gus, yes.
I love this distinction between the wisdom and the understanding as being opposites. It's really interesting. At the very beginning, you said that I think that Kabbalah was about the wisdom. So is that trying to then go back and understand that oneness?
It is. It's almost as if we're trying to get as close as possible to that oneness. The second verse talks about the sphirot of nothingness. Sphirot are really translated as counting. But what does it mean, nothingness? That at some point, what God is nothing. That which is just beyond everything we know about God is nothing. There's a point at which we cannot access, and nothing not meaning in an atheistic sort of a way, but nothing as in no thing. The Hebrew word for nothingness here is bli ma, which means without matter. It's no thing. There's nothing there, not even light, right? So in fact, it's interesting because so just if we can move now to the word engrave. So these letters are engraved. And it's interesting because if you turn your page over, I have a chart here which has, that the alphabet system is also based on, was born out of hieroglyph. And so you have each letter of the alphabet also means something, like Aleph is shaped like an ox. We might not see it exactly as much anymore, but you can sort of imagine some little horns and a tail on that Aleph. A bait is a house, and bet is a house. So each of the letters is also symbolic of something. if the alphabet begins with the ox, in a sense what an ox does is an ox creates grooves in the ground out of which, crops will grow. So the beginning is this engraving. Engraving is different than writing, because when you write, you're adding to something. You're adding substance to substance, literally ink. When you're engraving, you're taking something away. And if we're talking about the alphabet being given by God, God is undifferentiated space. God is one. There's no room for anything. There's no counting. You can't count if all you have is oneness. That's why when the Torah begins, it says, there was evening, there was morning, Yom Echad. It's wrong to translate it as there was evening, there was morning, a first day. It's not a first day. It doesn't say Yom Rishon. It says Yom Echad. The second day says Yom Sheni, second day. But when you have only one day, there's no first. It's just one. So God, in order to create, has to create a vacuous space, has to engrave out of God's self. And so the Kabbalists really describe creation as the lamp of darkness. That's one of the phrases they use, the lamp of darkness. Why? Because we're created in empty space. God first has to carve out of God's self. And in doing so, may diminish God, right? Damages that oneness. And some say, well, that's out of a great love that God does it. Refer to it as tzimtzum. God contracts in order to make space for us. But it also might be the reason why there's evil in the world. Because we could only exist in a godless space. Because God is everything. So, yes. Sefer with Safar and with Sipor. With text, with number, and with communication. So we talked a little bit, most part of your mouth. The lamed is from the middle of your mouth, and then the aleph comes from your throat. So the aleph, the final one, is the vowel, is the spirit. It comes from the deepest place. There's nothing physical to obstruct it. And all the things that physically obstruct our breath are called consonants. So vowel is pure breath, pure spirit. We cannot read the Torah without Samson breathing into it. Because otherwise it's just meaningless letters because you can translate it any which way. If you can add lots of different vowels to it. So God created the world with text, as we've talked about, letters, with numbers, and with breath. I think that might be, let me just say a couple of other things, just because we're almost at the end. We have just a couple more minutes, so what I have up here. So God's name is Yahweh, or Yud-He Vav-He. We don't try to pronounce it, right? So we even try not to write it. So let's just say, we look at these letters and we say Adonai, which doesn't have anything to do with the letters. It just means my Lord. The Jehovah's Witnesses, they actually took the words of Yahweh, except they pronounced the Y as a J, and then they took the vowels of Adonai, and they got Jehovah. The Vav. Our text calls God Yah. That's the first name of God that it says, with 32 mystical paths engraved Yah. So why Yah and why not Adonai? Interesting. First, if you do the numerical value just for fun of God, you have 10, 5, 6, and 5, which equals 26. If you look on your sheet, you have a really beautiful aleph here. Some of the rabbis understand that, well, aleph of course means one, but if you divide up the parts of the aleph, you have, you divide up the parts of the aleph, you could actually imagine that it's a vav and 2 yuds, right? Which would equal 26. Yeah, so 26 is God, is 1, something like that. Okay, that hurt. That hurt my head a little bit. So what the rabbis say, wisdom is considered, according to the Kabbalists, wisdom is male, and understanding is female. Now, you might think of that in lots of different ways and get upset, but but I think that it's really more biological. It's that it's in the woman, it's in the womb that cells become divided.
It's the plumbing thing again.
It's the plumbing, yeah. It's inside the woman where life suddenly takes form, where life takes form. The letter mem is often understood as a womb because, well, it's 40. There are 40 weeks, they say, to gestation. It's mayim, which is water. Even the way you write it, some say, is the water cycle. So you have the water, you have the condensation, you have the cloud, and then you have it raining down. And it's also the only letter that opens and closes. The final mem is closed. So Yah really is the part of God. So in a way, God's presence is feminine. You also have Shaddai, which is sometimes understood as a female reference to God. But you never have in the liturgy any prayers to a goddess or prayers to Shekhinah with God really being referred to as female. So in the beginning, you have this aspect of God engraving the world, preparing it in a way for it to come into understanding and discernment. And I think that on the last page, I'll just share with you so you can look at it yourself. On the last page, I have a poem by Milosz, Czesław Milosz, who's award-winning poet laureate, amazing poet, Polish, and he's not Jewish. I don't think he's not Jewish, but he was at one time, I think, the janitor at a Jewish library, and he was around at the time of the book burnings in Europe, and he witnessed the books, Jewish books, being destroyed, and he wrote a lot about that. And I wanted to just close with these two thoughts. One is there's a famous Rabbi Hanina ben Teredian from the 2nd century, and he was condemned by the Romans. He's one of the 10 martyrs that we would talk about on High Holy Days if we were not Reformed. But promise me a place in the world to come if I help you. And he refuses to kill himself. He doesn't want to expedite his own death by opening his mouth and breathing in the flames. But the execution, he agrees, and the executioner takes the wet fleece off of him so that he dies quicker. And so it's a story that's used, and then the executioner himself jumps into the flames. But it's used as a story about how you can actually remove something to allow someone to die, as opposed to adding this, I don't know, that's a different subject. But anyway, but in the moment when he's asked what does he sees the letters flying upward. It's interesting, it's similar to our concept of the soul, that we die, our parchment of our lives, our skin, parchment is literally skin, it's an animal skin, dies. But our letters, our soul, our story goes upward. It survives us. And so I'm going to close with Milosz's poem because it's a beautiful poem and it makes me think about the eternal power of the letters. And yet the books will still be there on the shelves, separate beings that appeared once still wet as shining chestnuts under a tree in autumn, and touched, coddled, began to live in spite of fires on the horizon, castles blown up, tribes on the march, planets in motion. We are, they said, even as their pages were being torn out, or a buzzing flame licked away their letters. So much more durable than we are, whose frail warmth cools down with memory, disperses, perishes. I imagine the earth when I am no more. Nothing happens, no loss. It's still a strange pageant, women's dresses, dewy lilacs, a song in the valley. Yet the books will still be there on the shelves, well-born, derived from people, but also from radiance, heights. It is time to pray. Use our letters. Thank you.